This is Dr. Hamilton. Welcome to my video series on William Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing. In this video, I'd like to discuss the animal imagery in Much Ado About Nothing. So, we've discussed the way that love seems to bring characters in this play into what we might regard as a realm of higher danger that requires insight. It's as if they suddenly enter a kind of hall of mirrors, and they struggle to identify between what is a reflection and what is actually real. The fear is that love changes people in their very essence. And Shakespeare uses a variety of imagery to dramatize this change, this transformation of a person's essence. So he uses war imagery, for example. Love makes men into turncoats. A turncoat is a traitor, a person who turns to the opposite side of a battle. Religious imagery. Love makes people into heretics. They betray what would have been regarded as the true religion and lose their souls. And then finally, animal imagery. In this, love denudes people of their reason, metamorphosing them into beasts. So this animal imagery implies a kind of opposition, an absolute opposition between reason and animality. So in a very, very comical scene, Beatrice, for example, when she's describing Benedick, who has been eviscerated by her in their last verbal combat in Act 1, Scene 1, she claims that in their last fight, 4 of Benedick's 5 wits went halting off, and now is the whole man governed with just one. He just has one left, one wit out of his 5. The Elizabethans thought that people had 5 wits. And so if he loses 4 of his 5 wits, then he's in serious trouble. So now he only has one of his one wit left to maintain the difference between himself and his horse, so that he can be known still as a reasonable creature. So he's been significantly diminished here, right? So although the tone is playful here, that opposition between Benedick and humans in general and reasonable creatures and horses is something that is very thin indeed. And, this is important because we might say that human dignity itself inheres in our ability to be what Beatrice calls reasonable creatures. That is, creatures who are conducted by, who are governed by rationality, whose conduct is based upon established, unchanging principles. Love, of course, is the opposite of that. Love, in this play anyway, seems to denude people of their reason, so that they become no different from, as the play describes, horses, fish, lapwings, march chicks, hawks, oysters. That's just a few of the zoo of creatures that get referred to in the play. So in the first verbal exchange between Beatrice and Benedick, we find this same pattern happening. Their verbal sparring evokes imagery of dogs, horses, parrots, cats, and more generally, beasts. And I want you to listen to this and just listen to the exchange. You don't have to catch every line. The exact meaning of every line is not important, but just listen to the metamorphosis that takes place here. So Beatrice starts off, "I had rather hear my dog bark at a crow than a man swear he loves me." And Benedict responds, "God keep your ladyship still in that mind, so some gentleman or other shall scape a predestinate scratched face. Scratching could not make it worse, and 'twere such a face as yours." "Well, you are a rare parrot teacher," Benedict responds. Beatrice, "A bird of my tongue is better than a beast of yours." Benedict, "I would my horse had the speed of your tongue, and so good a continuer." So this is a cartoonish insult contest, right? And every line virtually features a different animal comparison. Um, so this is lighthearted comedy, but the animal metamorphosis sort of points to, suggests, evokes some more serious um, themes. So the idea is that this bickering between men and women, might potentially denude them of their dignity, and sort of that marriage, close relationships between men and women can devolve into a kind of barnyard comedy. I mean, you could easily imagine this as in a movie, an animation movie, as a cartoon in which an animator changes Beatrice and Benedict into different animals, as for each line. So it's silly, but at the same time, it's not really very dignified. And so I think that's the sort of the subtle hint there. And the idea is that husbands and wives simply become ridiculous, right? And there's another kind of ridiculous husband and wife that Benedict evokes after this exchange when he sees Don Pedro, um, and he evokes the image of cuckoldry. A cuckold was someone who whose wife, or a woman whose husband, generally it was a wife, but it could be a husband. In fact, Beatrice mentions cuckoldry, potentially in relation to herself, whose partner has cheated on them, but they don't know that they've been cheated on. And the image is always that they have grow these horns, and that everybody else sees the horns, but they do. So it's this image of utter and total humiliation, but also of metamorphosis. And so when Benedict is regaling um, regaling Don Pedro and Claudio with his beliefs about his misogynistic views about marriage, and that women are just going to cheat on men, he uses this image of the cuckold. Well, actually, Don Pedro initially uses it. Don Pedro says, claiming that Benedict will eventually get married. In time, the savage bull doth bear the yoke, and Benedict responds, the savage bull may, but if ever the sensible Benedict bear it, pluck off the bull's horns and set them in my forehead, and let me be vilely painted, and in such great letters as they write, here is good horse to hire, let them signify under my sign, here you may see Benedict, the married man. And so, I mean, here he's imagining in humiliated and vivid terms himself becoming a cuckold. For Benedict, love reduces men to sort of these docile beasts who are humiliated and rightfully ridiculed by their friends. A little bit later in the passage, he compares himself, if he in married life, as somebody who should be hung up in a bottle like a cat and shot at. Apparently, they used to shoot cats. It's not clear whether they were dead or alive. Let's hope they were dead. In Act 5, Scene 4, Claudio sort of continues this pattern of imagery. So this happens at the comparison. Benedict using the cuckoldry imagery happens at the beginning of the play, and this happens at the end. And that is when Benedict finally is going to be married to Beatrice. So Claudio decides to rub it in and make fun of him. He explicitly uses an image comparing that evokes Ovid's Metamorphoses. It's an allusion to Ovid's Metamorphoses. Remember that an allusion is a reference to a work external to the play that adds more significance and meaning to it. So the archetype of the archetypal metamorphosis um, described in Ovid's Metamorphosis. Ovid was a Roman poet who wrote a book that was written in poetry. It was a book about mythology that basically chronicled all the myths of the time. And in one of the myths, probably the most famous one, Jove, who's the king of the gods, is described as falling in love with Europa, who is a princess, and he transforms into a bull, captures Europa, and carries her off. So he goes from being the highest being on the scale of things to the lowest. The loss of dignity is appalling, and the illusion comes back again and again in the play. So this reference, this illusion, is in the background when love is regarded as transforming characters. It's always somewhere in the background. This most famous of metamorphoses, of the king of the gods debasing himself to metamorphose into a bull. Claudio, of course, rubbing it in and recalling that imagery of the bull earlier in the play. The savage bull doth bear the yoke, but never the sensible Benedick, right? So Claudio can't resist insulting Benedick. We'll tip thy horns with gold, and all Europa shall rejoice at thee, as once Europa did at lusty Jove, when he would play the noble beast in love. It's kind of nasty humor. It's not really that funny, to be honest, but you can see that he's bringing that metaphor to fruition, and he's bringing in the allusion to Ovid's Metamorphosis there. Again, the idea is that love divests people of reason, causes them to lose their human dignity. And the irony, of course, is that this insult is coming from Claudio, who indeed has lost his dignity because of love. And actually, the further irony is that he's insulting Benedick, who has gained his dignity through love. Loving Beatrice, gained a deeper dignity, and actually had his authenticity, his truth tested by love, the crucible of love. And so that is one of the reasons why the joke doesn't really land, because it's coming from a kind of a fraudster who doesn't really understand himself at all, has no insight into himself at all, and Benedick is really kind of beyond that at that point. He's beyond his old misogyny. If love divests people of their reason, it also follows that it makes them prey, the prey of others. And as I indicated earlier in the play, and probably mentioned a couple times, the two primary figures that intervene in the fates of other characters in the play are Don Pedro and Don John. And in the religious iconography of the time, this would be sort of God and the devil, right? And of course, that brings in the religious imagery, whereby the devil might be trying to pervert you, whereas God might be converting you, or the devil you might say is trying to convert you to a false religion, a false belief, where your soul is then threatened. And you give up your soul, right? You're giving up your humanity, and you're becoming a beast again, right? So the religious imagery actually interpenetrates, is interwoven with, inextricably linked to the imagery of the animal imagery. So we said that. So the animal imagery feeds into this hunting imagery, and so we know that imagery of hunting therefore abounds, and there are real hunters. There's two hunters. One is hunting for a good purpose and one for a bad, but they're hunting. And who are they hunting? They're hunting animals who have lost control. Again, they've lost control of their reason, and so they're easy to catch. all you need is some bait, right? Because they know that these two characters, Claudio and Benedict, are being controlled by the love passion. So there's lots of references to hunting, lots of references to Cupid, who is an archer in the mythology, who hunts the lovers. Um, Don Pedro hatches his plan to get Beatrice and Benedict together. He says, if we can do this, Cupid is no longer an archer. His glory shall be ours, for we are the only love god. Again, Cupid is a mythological figure. I can't remember whether he's an Ovid's Metamorphosis right now, but he is a mythological figure, the god of love, right? So while Beatrice's friends prepare themselves to deceive her, this is when Don Pedro is executing his plan to hunt his prey. Beatrice's friends actually refer to Beatrice as an animal. Look, where Beatrice like a lapwing runs. A lapwing is a kind of bird. Also, continuing the illusion, lapwing is a bird in Ovid's Metamorphosis that a man turns into. So subtle echo of Ovid's Metamorphosis again, like a lapwing close by the ground to hear our conference. Then mixing metaphors, Ursula responds by transforming Beatrice into a fish. The pleasantest angling means fishing, is to see the fish cut with her golden oars the silver stream and greedily devour the treacherous bait. So angle we for Beatrice. So it's all very explicit, very on the surface. They're hunting. Beatrice is easily caught because it's so obvious to everyone else that she's in love with Benedict, and so it does not take much persuasion to get her with the program here. In a kind of uncomfortable image, on the other hand, when Beatrice finally acknowledges her love for Benedict, she has this beautiful, it's kind of a beautiful image, but it's kind of uncomfortable, I think, for us now. She resolves in Act 3, Scene 2, line 112, to tame my wild heart to thy loving hand. So in this instance, her wild heart is compared to a falcon and Benedict to the falconer. The twist is that she's the one who is taming her own heart, not Benedict. But nonetheless, she's taming it so that she can ultimately be obedient to Benedict, to love and obey, as the marriage ceremony says in the Book of Common Prayer. But still, I think that that's a little bit uncomfortable for us now. But the idea here might be, the implication here is interesting, which is that marriage is not really, displacing the inner animal, but sort of taming it and domesticating it. So, of course, Claudio is the character who takes metamorphosis farthest because of Don John's sinister influence. And that is one of the reasons why his joke above, as I said, falls flat, because he himself has truly become a beast and has truly become a vile, disgusting person through the influence, whether it's just because of Don John's influence or he was really like that all the while. He's certainly influenced into jealousy by Don John, and he fully indulges himself in it, humiliating Hero at her wedding and calling it off. He compares Hero, ironically, to those pampered animals that rage in savage sensuality at her wedding, Act 4, Scene 1, lines 59 to 60. Of course, Claudio is the animal. He's imagining her, and it's his desire that is feeding off of this image of her in savage sensuality that he can't stop himself from imagining, and it's an image that has not ever even occurred to her. as far as we know. Though she does, she's not completely chaste based upon some of her other comments. But this kind of imagery is not imagery that Hero is associated with. So the animal imagery underscores this notion that loss of control, love, precipitates something extremely dangerous. And as I said about the animal imagery, most gravitates towards the religious imagery. They're interlinked. They complement one another, because losing your soul is very similar to losing your reason, and the horror of finding that one has adopted a false belief and lost one's soul, become a heretic, become burned, and the horror of being metamorphosed into an animal are two sort of horrors that converge very well. So you'll see these imagery interlinked and merged together. So if we go back now to Act 1, Scene 1, when Benedict claims jokingly that Hero is unworthy, right? He's saying that she's unworthy, she's ugly, not that she's being unfaithful. But he says, "That's the opinion that fire cannot drive out of me. I will die in it at the stake." Don Pedro responds, "Thou wast ever an obstinate heretic in the despite of beauty." Just to state the obvious here, of course, Benedict's heresy is in not being susceptible to beauty here, not in being changed in his essence by beauty. But later on, he will talk about being converted by love and seeing with new eyes in his speech, in his first soliloquy. But still, he's talking about heresy in relation to love, and so the imagery is planted there. It doesn't have to make perfect sense for the logic of the imagery to germinate. So while Don Pedro's joke is that Benedict is a heretic for refusing the claims of Hero's beauty, if love can convert, it's possible that you can be converted to the wrong religion. And again, that is the horror here, to suffer and die for an error, to be converted to a false belief. And that is precisely what happens to Claudio. He's converted very easily, obviously, by Don John into a false belief about Hero. And that false belief then causes Claudio to metamorphose into a beast. So the false belief and the metamorphosis into the animal converge and interlock here, are inextricably intertwined. So animal imagery suggests peril of love. So again, I mean, these questions raise these patterns of imagery raise the question: how can love not be, a form of heresy? How can we know that love is trustworthy? As I've said earlier, we have two examples. One is of Claudio falling in love and being deceived, and entering into a sort of bestial nature. And the other is of Benedict falling in love and being elevated, achieving clarity with his love, finding principles that he did not know existed before with his love. How do you know the difference between the two? And I said it's like a hall of mirrors, or it's like a masked ball, where you're trying to understand what is behind the mask. How do I find my true love? How do I find my true self? How do I know the difference between the true and the false in myself and in others? Love can precipitate a false belief that can be manipulated by others, or it can just be a false belief that turns a person towards destruction, metamorphoses a person into their lower nature, and so they become possessed by that and cannot get back. So even marriages, marriage is set up in all of Shakespeare's play as the sort of quintessential domesticator. It is the thing that tames the savage beast, right? It is the savage bull, will bear the yoke. A yoke is the harness. Marriage is a harness that is going to tame the savage beast. And but even marriage's capacity for domestication is called into question by Claudio's outrageous display at the wedding, on his wedding day. And the play seems to suggest, through the figures of Don Pedro and Don John, that there's this sort of moral framework under which love operates, where you can be brought to good and evil. So we're continually reminded of the risk that love or passion poses, not just to reason, but to the soul. And I think that the imagery of this animal metamorphosis, really dramatizes what is most menacing and dangerous about the potential for love. The idea that you could give in to your lower nature and not realize it. You could be deluded from the outside and confused from the inside, rather than your higher nature, like Benedict is. And Benedict finds his higher nature in love, and then that gives him a sort of a sort of crystal bullet, a diamond bullet that cuts through the falsehood, and he finds a moment of lucidity and truth, and he finds a compass, a moral compass in his love. But that's not by any means guaranteed. So once again, the animal imagery, the war imagery, the religious imagery, all of it dramatizes this higher danger and almost a sort of quest that love brings. And I'm not sure that Shakespeare really, is clear, about, other than the fact that Claudio is just an obvious jerk. He's an empty suit, a selfish, spoiled brat, who doesn't have the character and doesn't deserve he's not worthy of Hero's love. The plot makes him worthy of her. The plot manipulates him into marriage with her, but he's not worthy of it. And Benedict, it turns out, is. He says, "Is it not strange that I love you?" That. So it's really about the higher danger that love brings us to, and these patterns of imagery that really dramatize that higher danger. So that's the end of the lesson. Thank you guys very much, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time.